Today we're going to start Unit 6 with Lecture 1, and for Lecture 1 we're going to basically be focusing on the overview of general classifications of both vitamins and minerals. So typically when we talk about vitamins and minerals in most nutrition classes, it's stated as these are the vitamins, these are the minerals, these are the deficiencies, toxicities, and this is the general function. So this class is going to cover that a little bit differently in that we are going to be focusing on specific functions of the vitamins and minerals related to their function. So they're going to be grouped with functions. So for instance, we will talk about the skeletal system, and that will include vitamin D, calcium, and phosphorus, as opposed to talking about vitamin D and vitamins, and then talking about calcium and phosphorus again in minerals. And many of those functions overlap because they are all intertwined. So this is going to be a little bit different than it has been in the past, or that you may have had this. But my hope is that by going over it this way, it will make sense why we have the deficiency and toxicity signs for the various vitamins and minerals that are stated. So for the first part of this lecture, we're going to focus primarily on vitamins, and we're going to discuss both fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins, not specifically, but just the classifications and what distinguishes the fat-soluble from water-soluble vitamins. So first, we're going to define vitamins. So what are vitamins? They are organic compounds, and they are essential nutrients despite being required in small amounts compared to our macronutrients, including carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. So these are needed in milligram, microgram, or grams per day. Most of the vitamins cannot be synthesized. Our exceptions to the rule is our vitamin D, which we utilize the sun to make our vitamin D. Our vitamin C, now if you remember from our antioxidant lecture, vitamin C, it all depends on the species. So if you are a pig, a chicken, a rodent, you can synthesize vitamin C. If you are a human, a guinea pig, a hamster, you need to be provided vitamin C. So since this is a comparative class, vitamin C can be synthesized. And the last one that can be synthesized is niacin. And if you remember, niacin can be synthesized from tryptophan. So our tryptophan can spare our niacin. In addition, one of the main functions of our vitamins and minerals actually is they primarily are acting as cofactors or coenzymes in biochemical reactions. Now, a lot of individuals, books, instructors interchange cofactor and coenzyme, and I may do that, so I apologize, but here I have them defined. So what is the difference between a cofactor and coenzyme? A cofactor is a non-protein component of a protein required for proper protein functionality. So this cofactor is more general. It is a more general term, and it can include vitamins and minerals. And the majority of our vitamins are acting in, or our minerals are acting in a cofactor function. Next is our coenzyme. So a coenzyme is a type of cofactor. It's a type of cofactor, but the main difference is it is organic. So our coenzymes can only be vitamins, because here our vitamins are organic compounds. So coenzymes are organic cofactors, and they shuttle groups from one enzyme to another. So that is the main difference between a cofactor and coenzymes. So here we have a little diagram of how cofactors actually work. So we have our enzyme down here. We have our two substrates and our carrier protein. You can see our enzyme, the one component of the one substrate binds the enzyme here. We have our carrier protein bringing the other substrate in, and you can see this carrier protein is a hexagon shape. However, this enzyme is requiring more of a square rectangle in order to fit in there. So how does our cofactor work? Well, our cofactor here in our diamond shape is able to enter this part. It binds right there on the enzyme, and when it binds, it causes a conformational change in our enzyme. So now you could see our hexagon is able to nicely fit into the enzyme, and we can bring the two substrates together and get our product right here. So once we have our product form, that releases the carrier protein. So without the cofactor, the precursors do not readily interact with the enzyme because we have this conformational change that needs to occur. So this is why many of the deficiency signs, specifically with our B vitamins, are going to be lethargic, being tired, and that's because many of our B vitamins are incorporated into our glycolysis, Krebs cycle, beta oxidation, so your enzymes are not functioning at adequate levels, so it makes you very tired. So what are things that differentiate vitamins from the other macronutrients is the structure. So all of our other macronutrients had some sort of unit or chain grouping of the amino acids are making proteins, glucose is making starch or glycogen, fatty acids are making triglycerides. So with our vitamins, they are individual units. So they are not linked, the individual units. And for the most part, especially our B vitamins, they are serving as cofactors or coenzymes. So the way they're doing this is just like in the previous diagram where they're allowing a conformational change. That conformational change is lowering the energy plane of the reaction. So therefore it requires less energy for that reaction to occur. In addition, our vitamins need a lower concentration. So where we need to eat so many grams of carbohydrates, amino acids, and lipids to meet our daily requirement, our concentration of our vitamins is small. So we only need, depending on the vitamin, milligrams or micrograms per day. So what are our vitamin classifications? Well, our vitamins can be classified into their hydrophobic state. So we have two classifications, our fat-soluble and our water-soluble vitamins. Our fat-soluble vitamins are hydrophobic, so they are found in fats and oils, so they are insoluble in water, which is also referred to as hydrophobic. They require bile for emulsion. So these are going to be, they are absorbed with the lipids. So we require lipid in our diet, therefore they need to have a formation of a micelle, and to form the micelle, we need our bile to form that emulsion. In addition, we need to have the lipoproteins for absorption and transport, so they are going in with our chylomicron. or portomicron if you're avian species, a chylomicron. They're also going to be transferred in our VLDL, also from the liver. Any of our excess can be stored typically in the liver adipose. In our fat-soluble vitamins, we have, it's A, D, E, and K are our fat-soluble vitamins, so we only have 4 of them. Our water-soluble vitamins, on the other hand, they are hydrophilic, so therefore they like water and are soluble in water, and they are found in the water compartments of food. So because of this, a lot of times they are found within the in a lot of our green leafy vegetables, and in addition, since they are hydrophilic, they're able to move directly into the blood. So they can go into the blood. Typically, a lot of them still have carrier proteins. If you have excess of the water-soluble vitamins, they can be excreted by the kidneys. In addition, they are very labile, meaning that they can easily be changed. Some of them can be produced by the microflora, primarily our B12. Vitamin K can also be produced by our microflora. A lot of our other B vitamins can also be produced by our microflora. And our water-soluble vitamins are primarily acting as cofactors. In contrast, our fat-soluble vitamins, as we discussed with vitamin E, it's in the cell membrane, it's an antioxidant, it's not a cofactor. Vitamin A and vitamin D are involved in gene transcription, and vitamin K does act as a cofactor, but the rest of our water-soluble vitamins are primarily acting as cofactors. So this figure is showing you the summary of all the metabolic pathways that our various water-soluble vitamins are involved in, and you by no means have to memorize this, but just goes to show you why basically when we start talking about all the various, especially B vitamins, why one of the common deficiency signs is that you're very lethargic and tired. Well, that's because you're unable to activate these various metabolic pathways which we need to gain our energy. So our water-soluble vitamins are serving as cofactors in these energy-yielding reactions. Therefore, without those water-soluble vitamins, we're not yielding as much ATP or energy. Therefore, you're lethargic and tired. And as I mentioned, you don't need to know this or memorize this at all at this point in time. However, later on, when we are talking specifically about B vitamins that are involved in carbohydrate metabolism, for instance, you'll have to be able to tell me some of the spots in which these B vitamins are acting in their metabolic pathways. So the next component of this lecture, we're going to talk about our minerals. And our minerals can be classified as both macro minerals and trace minerals. So our minerals are inorganic elements, and they are required in very small quantities for normal growth and reproduction, is one definition. Another definition is that it is the ash that remains when food is burned between 350 to 600 degrees Celsius. And this is part of the proximate analysis where you develop the ash. I would like to mention that with our ash, we have that the carbon, chlorine, iodine, and selenium are not components of the ash, so you miss getting those ones, and that's because these are very volatile, and they end up evaporating off as gas or oxidizing. In addition, ash inadvertently ends up including oxalates, carbonates, and sulfates, and these form during the burning process, and they are not necessarily the form in which our body is utilizing them. So we do get some false results when we are doing this proximate analysis. But two definitions. Obviously, the top one is the more appropriate for what a mineral actually does. In addition, our minerals cannot be broken down into smaller units. And so therefore, for this class, now this may be different in other nutrition classes that you may take, a mineral is equal to the element for this class. In addition, depending on the charge of the mineral, it can be hydrophilic or hydrophobic. So if it has either a positive or negative charge, it's going to be hydrophilic or water-loving. If it is neutral, it's going to be hydrophobic and therefore needs some sort of carrier protein to get it transported throughout the blood. So as with all the other nutrients where we have hydrophobic and hydrophilic components, minerals also fit into that classification. Now we can also classify our minerals as based off of the amount that they are within the body. So those that are found within the human body greater than 5 grams is what we refer to as macrominerals. So these are all in a 150-pound individual, a 70-kilo individual, all going to be a greater than 5 grams. And this terminology was based in humans, and it's been we've used the same designations in animals. So obviously, there's a mouse, for instance, isn't going to have greater than a significant amount more of calcium or have the same concentration. The only exception to this is magnesium. So magnesium is really, it's about like 4.7 grams in a 150-pound individual, but since it's still close to the 5 grams, we still classify that as a macromineral. In addition, the other way in which we classify them based off of macromineral is that they are needed in the body based off of milligram basis. So on a daily basis, you need so many milligrams of these. And our macrominerals include calcium, phosphorus, sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, and sulfur. And these have different functions. So our calcium and phosphorus are going to have our structural function. Our electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and chloride, and these are, our electrolytes are responsible for our acid-base balance. And then we have metabolic regulators, which is mainly, all of them are associated with metabolic regulation. Our magnesium specifically, also our structural sulfur. Sulfur is found within our sulfur amino acids, methionine and cysteine. Compare that to our trace minerals, and these are found in the human body less than 5 grams, and typically they are required in micrograms or less per day, also referred to as parts per million or parts per billion. The majority can be found within the bone and teeth, so we can store some of these. And there are many various trace minerals, but we're going to focus on this class mainly due to time on our iron, copper, manganese, iodine, zinc, selenium, molybdenum, and fluoride. There are some that are referred to as ultra trace, which include things like chromium, nickel, arsenic, silicon, and those show that especially in animals, that there is some added benefit, but not having them in the diet, you don't see an overt deficiency symptom like you do with these other more prominent trace minerals. And these minerals are basically acting more as cofactors in metabolic pathways. And in addition, the toxic level is usually, there's a very narrow range in which we can meet the requirement and at which point that mineral becomes toxic. So there's the toxic level is only slightly above the requirement. And as I mentioned before, be aware that the macro and micro or trace mineral designations in animals, it's all based off of what was adopted for humans. So here we have our distinction between our mineral content for a 60 kilogram human. So here, the top part, going from magnesium and up, these are all the macro minerals or major minerals. And then we have, going from our iron down, those are our trace minerals. So this is just showing you, giving you an idea of how great the difference is. Obviously, calcium is the most prominent of all the minerals within the body. So a 60 kilogram human is going to have just under 1,200 milligrams of calcium within the body. You don't have to know any of these numbers for the exam, but just to have an idea, calcium is the greatest of all the minerals by far. Magnesium out of the major minerals or the macro minerals is the lowest, and then iron is the greatest trace mineral. And you can see the rest of them are much lower. Now, minerals have different bioavailabilities. So what is bioavailability? Bioavailability is the rate and extent to which a nutrient is absorbed from the intestine. Now, bioavailability goes for all nutrients, not just minerals, but it's most greatly affects minerals. And some things that affect a mineral's bioavailability is based off of what it may be chelated to. So chelated is a term for being bound to having an interaction with another molecule or compound. And some chelators, such as our organic acids, specifically fumarate or malate, or amino acids, actually improve the absorption of the mineral. So, for instance, this where it comes into to improve your iron absorption, it's good to have orange juice. So the citric acid, for instance, is going to improve the absorption of the iron. So having orange juice with your bacon and eggs in the morning is better than having milk with your bacon and eggs if you're trying to improve your iron concentration. In addition, there are some other chelators that are naturally found within foods, and these prevent absorption. The most common ones are phytic acid. These are found within legumes and grains, and they bind calcium, iron, and zinc. And then we have oxalic acid. These are found in rhubarb, collard greens, and spinach. So this binds calcium and iron. So basically, you may have heard that spinach is a great source of iron, which it is. However, spinach has a lot of oxalic acid within it. So a lot of that iron that is found within spinach is actually unavailable to you. So it's one of the reasons why it's more important to cook your spinach to free up that iron, because you need to get rid of the oxalic acid. So what is a chelator? So chelation is actually Greek, and it means big lobster claw. So here on the right-hand side, you can see this is actually a bird talon, a diagram of a bird talon, and it is holding on to that mineral or element within it. It's a large molecule and it binds or grasps the mineral. This can be either irreversible or it can be reversible. So some of our irreversible ones would be more the phytic acid. You need specific enzymes called phytases in order to cleave the phosphate off of the inositol ring so we don't have this chelation. Some of them are reversible, so they can have either a very strong affinity or a looser affinity for the molecule. Knowing this, we have actually developed some chelates that are used to remove metals from blood. So if you have lead poisoning or iron poisoning, you go to the ER, they're going to give you a chelator. One, for instance, is EDTA. They'll put that in the IV, and that will help bind up those heavy metals and allow your liver to clear them. As I mentioned, amino acids can also chelate minerals. So our minerals are actually captured within the center of our amino acids. And so here we have our trace mineral in the center of these two amino acids. And this is really, if you've ever heard of organic minerals, if you've done anything with animal nutrition, there's a big push. Some companies are actually developing organic minerals in place of inorganic minerals in the animal's diet. So these organic minerals are utilizing amino acids to chelate that specific mineral, and that increases the bioavailability because the organic compounds are protecting the mineral from other chelates, such as the phytates and the oxalates, and those would impede absorption. So using organic minerals in feed, this is one of the reasons why they have better absorption or better bioavailability than inorganic minerals. So our organic chelators, such as our amino acids, they help reduce or mask the charge on the metal ion. So this decreases the interaction of that ion interacting with the mucus in the unstirred water layer. It also protects it from naturally occurring chelates in plants, such as the phytates and oxalates. In addition, it can facilitate passive absorption of the minerals between the enterocyte tight junctions. So instead of using transporters to go through the enterocyte and then go into the blood, that it can actually enhance the absorption between those two enterocytes, so it can travel through those tight junctions. Now, minerals are very interesting to work with because they are charged, and so many, if you remember your periodic table, they can be interchanged with each other based off of their charge. We have these interactions that occur. So this is, you by no means have to memorize this, but this is just giving you an idea of how all these various minerals interact with each other. So if we have two arrows facing each other, so they are, if the arrows are aimed towards each other, we have synergy to where they're going to enhance the absorption of each other. If they're aimed away, they're going to interfere and have an antagonism. So here we have our phosphorus and our aluminum. We have the two arrows pointing towards each other. So drinking your soda, which has a lot of phosphate in it to give it that nice brown color out of an aluminum can, we're going to increase the absorption of both phosphorus and aluminum out of our aluminum can. compared to selenium and mercury, for instance. So those are going to have an antagonism. So if you accidentally get a lot of mercury, let's say you eat a lot of wild fish that had high levels of mercury, you're going to inhibit your selenium absorption. Now, for both our vitamins and minerals, it's very rare that we have a deficiency in just one. Usually, these deficiencies occur as overall malnutrition that's occurring in either the human or the animal. So they're eating something, and you will see deficiencies in multiple vitamins and multiple minerals. Now, the only exception to that is when we are doing research, and especially when we first were discovering many of these vitamins and minerals in the early 1900s, we had what we refer to as purified diets. And these purified diets, we gave the most basic compounds, and we would specifically leave out a particular vitamin or mineral and looked in to see what deficiency was induced from that. But that rarely happens in nature. You're going to see multiple deficiencies occur. So as we talk more about these various vitamins and minerals, you'll notice when we're talking about deficiency symptoms, a lot of them are pretty similar. And our individual, if we do happen to get individual vitamin or mineral deficiencies, it's going to be more likely to happen in domestic animals as opposed to humans, and usually this is due to an error within our feed formulation. So if we have someone forgets to add the someone forgets to add a specific component such as our iron, etc. A lot of times, even that's a little more difficult because usually we have a mineral premix and a vitamin premix. So usually if someone fails to put in the premix while they're mixing the feed, you're still going to get multiple deficiencies. But it can occur, and this is usually an error in the feed formulation or the feed preparation. Now, our vitamins and minerals, we have various requirements based off of different things. So first we have, it depends on the species. So our requirements for some of our vitamins and minerals is different based off of if you are a foregut fermenter or a non-ruminant or hindgut fermenter. So our ruminants, for instance, really don't require too many B vitamins, particularly because their microbes are able to synthesize them. So even though the ruminant isn't specifically making them, the bacteria are. So they have different requirements for their vitamins. So they don't need to have supplemental B vitamins put in, for instance, compared to our non-ruminants. We have to have, so humans, pigs, poultry, rodents, we have to have our B vitamins. Because our ruminants are depending on some of the microbes, for instance, ruminants don't have a B12 requirement, they have a cobalt requirement, where we don't have a cobalt requirement, we have a B12 requirement. In addition, the diet depends on our requirements, so what we're eating. So for instance, if you really like to have your carbohydrates, you're going to need more B vitamins than, let's say, if you have a higher fat diet. The age is going to affect, usually the younger you are, the higher percentage that you're going to need those vitamins and minerals compared to an older individual. Physiological state, so if you are reproducing, gestating, if you're growing, if you're lactating, you're going to have a different requirement than if you are not. Stress level, and that includes immune response. So we're going to change based off of our requirements. So, and this even includes like physiological induced stress, such as exercise. So, for instance, if you are a ultra marathon enthusiast and you like to run 26 miles a day, you're going to have a higher requirement for your antioxidants than if you are a normal individual that exercises for 20 minutes 3 times a week. We also have inborn errors of metabolism. So individuals that have Down syndrome, if you're on an autism spectrum, etc., you're going to have various differences in your requirements for your vitamins, minerals. In addition, some medications are going to cause an increase in the requirement. So many of your antidepressants, for instance, are going to increase the urinary excretion of your water-soluble vitamins. So therefore, if you're on an antidepressant, you should probably take supplemental B vitamins. So how do we determine the optimal levels? And what is the optimal level? The optimal level of the vitamins and minerals is the concentration that achieves the best growth rate, feed utilization, and health while providing adequate body reserves. And this is different from the levels that prevent easily detectable deficiencies. Now, a lot of times, especially in human nutrition, those RDA levels are put in place based off of what level do we feed or do we recommend to prevent this clinical deficiency. So how much calcium do you need to consume to prevent osteoporosis? Not specifically what's the best level of calcium for an individual to consume for overall health. And depending on what endpoint you're looking at is going to vary things greatly. So are you looking at the optimal level of selenium to help with immune function, or are we talking about what's going to prevent white muscle disease? So it really depends what your endpoint is, which is going to change the requirement. So it makes it a little more difficult to figure out the best level to feed of the vitamins and minerals depending on your endpoint. So here we have a graph showing how we come up with the human recommendations. So the human recommendations are daily recommended intakes, or DRIs. So this graph is a summary of all the DRIs. So what makes up the DRI? We have the estimated average requirement. So this is where you got a 50-50 shot of being either deficient or adequate. So risk of inadequacy here is 50%. So depending on your particular physiological state, you may be deficient for you or you may be adequate. So it's very individual. Our next level is our RDA, and this is basically looking where we have only about 2.5% of the individuals may be inadequate. So we have 2.5% may be inadequate. And I would like to point out that with this graph for humans, that it is basically made for individuals. So you will never have a complete, this is the best recommendation for all people, because it really depends on all those various things from the previous slide. So your age, your physiological state, your inborn errors in metabolism, medications, etc. So we'll never have this completely be at zero. And next we have our upper limit. Our upper limit is the amount that it is going to, if you go beyond this, you may be at risk of having toxic effects. However, depending on your physiological state, this may be the amount that you need, for instance. Many times these are based off of the disappearance of a deficiency symptom and the appearance of a toxicity symptom. So, for instance, if we were to think of the vitamin D, currently the recommendation for vitamin D, I believe it was in 2010, it increased from 200 to 600 international units per day. So initially that was based off of the disappearance of rickets. How much cod liver oil did you have to consume to prevent rickets or osteoporosis? And that was 200 IU would prevent you from having rickets or osteoporosis develop. And then the upper limit is at what point in time do you have calcification of your soft tissues? So we increased it because now they are looking more at other endpoints, so not just the disappearance of these overt clinical diseases, but to some other endpoints. And this, as I mentioned, it's based off of individuals. It depends on your genotype, your physiological state, your diet, and your stress level. So what is our recommended daily allowance, or the RDA? It is a benchmark, and this is all for humans, benchmark for nutritionally well-balanced diet in humans. And it was actually developed during World War II to ensure that our soldiers had proper nutrition, because when many of them enlisted after the bombing at Pearl Harbor, they were malnourished, so they had many nutritional deficiencies, and that's actually when the government started the school lunch programs to ensure that our young men would be healthy enough to serve their country during war. And it applies to all nutrients, not just vitamins and minerals, but we use it more specifically to evaluate the differences between our vitamins and minerals. And it protects against possible deficiencies and toxicities. So it sets the minimum dietary requirement of the nutrient for an average healthy adult. So like I said, it depends on the age, the physiological state, the stress level of that individual. Now, determining the requirement for animals is much different than what we utilize for humans. So in animals, we're not so much concerned about individual animals. We are concerned about the population. So it would be too expensive to ensure that each individual animal was hitting its optimal requirement based off of its age, physiological state, etc., inborn errors of metabolism. So therefore, we base it off of the population, knowing that some of the animals may not, we may hit some of them not meeting their optimal recommendation, but we're going to avoid overt deficiencies because we're basing it off of the population. So here, with most animals, we are looking at what we refer to as the broken line. So we will have a titrated level of the nutrient that we are looking at compared to a specific animal response. So this is the total amount of the nutrient, so going from 0 to whatever percentage, and then our animal response, typically it is going to be some production parameter such as growth, feed conversion ratio, milk production. are going to be some of the animal responses that we're looking at. And then we have our population, some that are put specifically on these deficient diets here. And then we have some that are specifically put on these higher levels. So then we look and see at what point in time this graph breaks. So where do we have this break? So at this point in time, we would look at it more here. So this is going to be optimal. So this would be our requirement that we would set for this specific group of animals. Now, although we do get added increase or improvement over here in the special applications or the greater amount and the optimal, you can see that it's not very great. So basically, having this nutrient at higher concentrations is not worth the cost because we're not seeing enough increase in our production parameter, which with animal nutrition, that's how we are living. We need to be as efficient as possible. So although this higher level out here may be better for some animals based off of their physiological state, etc., it's just not worth the cost to have all of them fed at that high level. And then we have some animals at that point in time maybe hitting more of their upper limit, and we also have to consider, for instance, various environmental issues, so we don't want to cause added pollution, etc. So the next concept we're going to talk about is called food synergy. And this is the concept in which nutrients are better utilized within the body when they are consumed as food as opposed to supplements. So, and there's a push in some of the all natural, etc. individuals that actually take vitamins, but their vitamins are in, as opposed to being the inorganic compounds that you must take with food, that it is actually a capsule with a bunch of kale or it's actually food components that's within the capsule. So that whole theory is coming from you're better off having your food come together, and that happens because we have this food synergy whereby one nutrient actually enhances the digestion and absorption of another, improving its bioavailability. So this is, as I mentioned before, a good example would be ascorbic acid or vitamin C with iron. So if you have ascorbic acid or your orange juice, your high vitamin C is going to improve your iron absorption. Combine that with the citric acid also. That's going to improve the bioavailability of the iron. You will absorb more iron if you have orange juice with your eggs and bacon in the morning than you would with a glass of milk. In addition, we have other compounds found within the food that are not nutrients that enhance the action of the nutrients. So these would be our polyphenols. So specifically, this is more of the carotenoids. So the carotenoids may have an antioxidant property, and they're able to spare vitamin E, for instance. So they are able to be oxidized without having to utilize our vitamin E before we need vitamin E within our cell membrane. So there are other compounds that enhance the action, and that's where we end up getting a lot of the nutraceutical effects, which we'll be talking about in a couple minutes. Now, many people like to argue about the benefit of supplementation, and do we really need to take these multivitamin supplements? And basically, if you eat a well-balanced diet, you do not require supplementation. If you have adequate amounts of your fruits and vegetables, you probably do not need to take a daily supplement. However, most people do not, especially in the U.S., they do not consume optimal amounts of vitamins and minerals. So we're more concerned about going to the fast food and getting the energy as opposed to having more green leafy vegetables within our diets. So having suboptimal amounts actually increases your risk of chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease and cancer. So if you know that you do not eat adequately or have a well-balanced diet, you still hold on to your eating habits of being 3 years old and you refuse to eat your vegetables because they just taste yucky to you, then you need to take a supplement. However, meta-analysis studies have shown that taking supplements above the RDA does not impact morbidity or mortality in humans. So by over-consuming your vitamin C, for instance, you are not going to decrease the risk of you getting a cold. And it's also not going to decrease the risk of you dying from your cold. So having a level right around the RDA is more critical. So if you know that you don't eat a well-balanced diet, take your 1-a-day vitamin, and that's going to get you at your RDA. Taking added B vitamins, etc., it really is not going to improve your performance or the way that you feel unless you are really at risk of being deficient. So next we have our nutraceuticals. So what are nutraceuticals? These are food components that provide putative health benefits. So this is going to include your vitamins and minerals at high levels. It's going to be your curcumin, resveratrol, your ginkgo biloba, glucosamine. All of that is referred to as a nutraceutical. And nutraceuticals are unregulated by the FDA. So this actually, since nutraceuticals are not referred to as drugs, it's part of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, in which 2 senators, one Democrat, one Republican, put this act together, saying that the supplement industry is self-regulating enough, so therefore they don't need any government oversight, which results in them making various claims. And so it's very unregulated. There's no federal oversight at all. So really, that means that you really are taking a risk by just listening to the various infomercials at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night and saying, oh, I need to consume more resveratrol, so I'm going to buy all this, and this is going to be my solution. I would also recommend don't listen to anything Dr. Oz has to say. It's been shown that he's a liar. So many of these nutraceuticals have isolated a specific component from a food or a plant, and these are typically foods or plants that are healthy, and they sell that isolated compound from that food or plant at a pharmaceutical dosage. So it's significantly over the RDA. In addition, if it's a vitamin and mineral, in addition, it's going to be at very high levels. So you may not see the benefit if you were to consume it in that healthy food. This includes, so all of our nutraceuticals includes our vitamins and minerals, our herbal supplements, and our other compounds. So our carotenoids, including carotene, lycopene, isoflavones, and our cellular components, so our CoQ10 and our carnitine. So all of those are nutraceuticals, and I would strongly suggest that if you're going to consume a nutraceutical, to help you lose weight or to prevent heart disease, to prevent cancer, that you really consult with your doctor and make sure that they understand what you're taking and why you're taking it. And I believe that they would be much better at advising you than some blog that you read on the internet.